Merriam-Webster defines a trope as an idea or expression that has been used by many people. When we think about tropes in the modern era, oftentimes we think about literary tropes. These are well-worn trends or patterns that get used over and over again by authors. They're things that we look for as readers. They're patterns that are comforting and familiar. We sort of know how the story is going to go. They're things that we can recognize and point out. And in the era of modern search engine optimization, they're often also used as tags, way to find stories that we know we might like. Or in this case, stories that we might not like quite so much. As we take a look at the 5 worst tropes in fantasy. Hello, welcome back to the channel. My name is Paul. Talk about all things sci-fi and fantasy here. And if you enjoy this video, definitely be sure to subscribe and give a thumbs up because there are so many more of these that I can do, best and worst, sci-fi and fantasy. There are a lot of different things that we can do with this particular train of thought as we take a look at this, in this case, these 5 worst tropes. And Paul, is this just your opinion? Where are you getting this information from? Well, of course, if you've watched any of my videos, you know I do occasionally like to frequent Reddit, and r/fantasy did provide the info for this particular video. I went back, took a look at the 5 top posts sort of in this topic for the last year, and analyzed hundreds of comments, sort of boiled them down, distilled them into these 5 worst tropes. Now, some of them were sort of a little bit more amorphous. I combined things a little bit here, but spoiler alert a little bit, there was a very clear winner of the one that people absolutely hate. So be sure to stick around for that one at the end and let me know if you guessed it in the comments before you got there. I'm not going to put it in the chapters. I'm just going to put time. Okay. You can skip ahead, I guess, if you want, but you know, join me on this journey. All right, let's go. Coming in at number 5, if you're a fan of maybe more epic or high fantasy, this might not be one that you see quite so much. But if you are a romantasy fan, this is one, especially in modern times, that has become extremely hated, and that is, of course, the love triangle. Now, if you're a millennial like me, sci-fi and fantasy had no small amount of love triangles. I think back to things like Twilight and Hunger Games, you know, Team Edward and Team Jacob. And over time, it really feels like that trend has fallen off quite a bit. For quite a few reasons, in fact. I think the big one often has to do with the fact that if you're trying to earnestly develop 2 different love interests, it's basically just time that you could be, developing a better relationship with one of them. And I think for a lot of people as well, there's often a very sort of clear winner, quote unquote, between the 2 potential love interests. I know that it's technically not one, but I read Fourth Wing earlier this year, and one of the characters, I think at least to a point, was set up to potentially be that, but really there was never a chance that the main character would get with this other guy. So I don't know. I mean, take a look at those sort of things. I think often it falls into sort of that realm. But I think especially in more modern times, as romance has become such a part of so many genres now, people sort of want to fall back and sort of enjoy those more well-worn tropes. And love triangles, just not having it. That's for sure. At number 4, we sort of have this mishmash and amalgam between sort of status and culture and then societal norms. And I sort of put all these together because I do think they sort of, go hand in hand. One of them is this idea of a character, usually the main character, who has a completely different value system from basically anyone around them. You maybe live in this like super patriarchal society and, there's this very much like clear hierarchy of how things go. But then you have someone who's just like a complete rebel, totally off base, has a completely different thought process from anyone else, but they're just like a farmer or something. They not like exposed. They don't have some sort of wise old mentor. They haven't found some sort of secret book or text. They're really just someone who apparently woke up one morning and decided that everything they knew in life and society was broken and they wanted to think in a different way. And while yes, technically that can happen, it's just very rare that it happens without any sort of main catalyst. And sort of the flip side, or sort of joining with this idea that you have a character who grows up in a certain caste, say a peasant, for example, who suddenly is thrust into high society and can sort of instantly adapt to that situation without having any of the appropriate schooling, tutelage, or lived experience that you would need to actually pass yourself off as a noble. I think a book that actually did a really good job of this was Mistborn. All the sort of process that Vin had to go through in order to set herself up to justifiably be able to swim in noble culture. But oftentimes, especially for like more heist-esque novels, this is something that's sort of just glazed over and not really addressed a whole lot. And it's one that I definitely agree can be problematic. Coming in at number 3, we have communication, or better, I guess you should say, miscommunication. And there's a bunch of sort of different examples that were used across these various comments, but they basically can all be summed up as characters just not talking to one another. What's going on here, team? Is it a character who's blackmailed and needs to undermine the rest of the party, but if they just told everyone else, maybe they could join together and sort of solve the problem? Is it a wise mentor who comes in and says, I have this key piece of information for you, and then in the next page they get either killed or kidnapped, taken away, and suddenly I need this piece of information, and we have to get this whole person back, and it creates a sort of unnecessary drama. And that's really the crux of a lot of this, I think. Unnecessary drama. Candidly, I mean, I think a lot of people just kind of consider it lazy writing. If the only, axiom for this sort of conflict happening is characters just not taking the absolute basic time and effort to talk to one another, it just kind of feels lazy, because we, the reader, we know what's going on. Like, just talk to them. And it's frustrating. You never want to frustrate your reader in that way. There are absolutely times when this can be done well. And as with all of these tropes, they absolutely can be done well, or, sort of subverted in different ways. These obviously aren't always hard and fast rules, but this is one I feel often, I mean, I can think of a couple examples for sure in books that I've even read this year, where a character is just doing that little bit of a better job talking to one another, could have dealt with a whole lot of problems before they even started. And treat, the readers were smarter than that. Treat your readers like they're smart, because, a lot of this sort of more, I'll call it what it is, lazy writing isn't going to fly here in 2024. Coming in at number 2, the one that almost took the top spot, just barely sliding into this number 2 position here, was one I'm calling the hero overnight. And this is one that was called out just in an absolute ton. Basically, this idea that you've got this sort of undertrained farm boy or peasant girl and suddenly thrust into a position where they're the chosen one. And within, 6 months, they're basically a master swordsman, sorcerer, whatever they need to be. They're beating masters who've been training at this their entire lives. Looking at you, Aragon. There's a bunch of examples like this in various books, but basically it's about the time frame and the time span that these characters work. It's not that they necessarily don't have the potential to be as amazing as they are. It's not that they, can't get to that place eventually, but there are definitely a bunch of examples, quoth, where you just see characters who are put in this position where after only a few months of training, again, suddenly they are the absolute highest peak or best. And yes, again, I understand this is a plot device. I understand that these are often, that they're the protagonists. They literally main character syndrome. But I do wish that books did, and I think, funnily enough, when I talk about Lit RPG a lot recently, I do think often this is one that Lit RPG does pretty well, with more of these sort of slow burn starts where they start characters off quite weak, and there is that real time and, effort that's often spent. Or if there is a level up moment, at least it's explained. And that's one I think that needs to be, called out a decent amount here, because that's one that's still highly prevalent in books that we see today. Before we get to number 1, I do want to give out some honorable mentions. And these are ones that I picked because these are ones that I'm not a huge fan of. So these are sort of maybe not necessarily up there, but they're ones that I just kind of wanted to shout out because this is my video and I get to do that. The first honorable mention is the hard-won victory only leads to making things worse. And the book that this commenter called out was The Dresden Files, which was literally my reason that I DNF'd The Dresden Files. And I probably mentioned that like 4 times on this channel already, because it makes me so sad because so many people love the series and I really, really wanted to. Another example, and not a series that I would recommend now as an adult who has a functioning brain, but sort of Truth did this a lot too over that course, that series. The second you sort of solve one problem, you actually create a whole slew of others, and then you have to spend the next book cleaning up the problem that you made by fixing the one in the first book, and you just continue that loop, and it's kind of just lazy storytelling, honestly. The next one that was called out was one that I hadn't even really thought about, but holy crap, it's true. And it's basically this idea that if a heist or a plan or an idea is explained, it's going to fail. But if it's not explained, it's going to succeed. Which, like, the more I thought about it recently, like, holy crap, yes. Even, and I love this book series, but I'll call it out here. Dungeon Crawler Carl is really bad for this. If all the characters meet together and like, we have a plan, and then that you go and do the thing and they like retroactively explain the plan, basically everything is going to go almost according exactly right, according to that said plan. Obviously, with some exceptions in there. And I think when it doesn't go right, and you subvert that trope, that's when things go really, really well and are really, really exciting. But yeah, the more I think about it, the more they like meticulously plan and explain the heist, you absolutely know that heist is going to go completely wrong. For sure. The last one here, I don't even think it's necessarily a bad trope. I just think it's hilarious to think about that. Holy crap, yeah, this is such a thing in fantasy. The orphan assassin, the found little orphan that's trained to be his masterful assassin. Fitz, what are you doing, buddy? And in so many other books. Again, I don't even one that I necessarily hate. It's just, the whole like if I had a nickel every time it happened, I'd have a bunch of nickels. I just butchered that, but you know what I meant. Anyway, great honorable mentions. And any other honorable for you reading or watching this video? Put your honorable mentions if I missed them down in the comments. And again, did you guess this fifth and final trope as we get into it here? And this one is one I'm calling quite simply kill the villain. And this is one that was ubiquitously across the top so many times. A hero who will carve their way through an army of grunts, kill hundreds or thousands of people, only to hesitate or like still their blade when they finally get to the big bad who is behind it all. Because, well, maybe this person is human, and maybe they have a heart of gold, or maybe they can be redeemed. Man, you just killed like so many henchmen. Why suddenly now are you having moral scruples or so many situations that could be avoided later if you had just killed the big bad villain? Because yeah, this is a trope that I hadn't thought about a ton, but man, it is really common, really prevalent. I would say more like TV more often than books, at least the ones that I've read recently. But yeah, definitely one that is annoying and definitely one that I would not necessarily want to put into a book. So there you have it, at least according to our Slash Fantasy, the 5 worst fantasy tropes. Did the ones you expect end up on this list? Again, let me know down in the comments. And if you want to see more of these, taking a look at favorite tropes or diving into sci-fi as well, be sure to let me know. And of course, if you enjoy this content, be sure to subscribe and give it a thumbs up. And I will see you all next time. Cheers.